As we enter into the Chodesh of El, into the month of El of preceding Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we're going to be hearing numerous times, either from our rabbis, Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshiva, of how making Kabbalahs, accepting upon ourselves small acts, be it of Torah, of davening, of chesed, of kindness, is going to make the whole difference. It's going to tip the scales. Small Kabbalahs, small commitments, small steps. And we go through this year after year, and we hear this, and we internalize it on some level, and we try to make changes. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But I think a large part that goes into the equation as to those that fail, and the times that we do fail, is that we have a hard time understanding of how these small steps add up to something bigger. If we would only see, as we're so accustomed to today, to seeing the direct repercussions, ramifications, or results of our actions, be it the good or the negative, obviously would have so much more of an effect on us. So if we could see how our small actions, our small upgrades in our life make such significant changes so quickly, we would all jump onto it, take it, and run with it. I think from this week's Parsha, we find an example of this in an extreme manner. The Torah tells us that by the Egla Arufa, when there's a person murdered outside the city, so the elders, the Zakenim of the city, have to come over, and they say, Yadeinu lo shafchu es adam hazeh. Our hands were not involved in this murder of this individual. We were not guilty. Yadeinu, our hands are not filled with this man's blood. And the obvious kasha is, who would have thought for a second that these elders have anything to do with the murder of this individual? And Rashi explains, Rashi brings down, what Chazal say, that what they're saying is that if we did not see off this traveler properly, it was nothing to do with us, and perhaps we did not guilty of not escorting him properly and not giving him food and provisions for the way. What does one have to do with the other? How does not giving food and provisions and escorting one properly from their city or from their house, what does it do with murder? Where do we see the relationship between this seemingly small, perhaps even insignificant act of doing some nice chesed have anything to do with the fact where we would suspect you of being guilty of murder? But the Darchei Musar tells us that's exactly what we're saying. He brings from the Rambam that we have sometimes, we have an Abizrayu Da'arayas, we have a Abizrayu of other Isurim. He goes, there's an Abizrayu D'Ritzicha. Abizrayu D'Ritzicha means there's murder, which is the actual act of taking out another individual. And then there's the Abizrayu. Those smaller, finer nuances, those branches that come out of the trunk, those branches of those smaller tributaries that come out of the larger idea of murder, which that we could be guilty of. And if we're guilty of those smaller steps, of those small tributaries, those small streams, it could eventually lead to ultimately committing the ultimate act of actually snuffing out another individual's life physically for good. And he says that these Zakenim, of course, no one is chayshish them for murder. No one suspected them at all have anything to do with this. But what they have to answer up, what they have to make themselves clean and say, we weren't even involved in these small acts. We're not even guilty of these small things of not showing proper chesed, of not showing proper kindness, of not taking care of a fellow human being. Because if we were guilty of that, then we'd be saying that we were guilty of murder. Because if we're guilty of these small things and transgressing on not treating another individual properly, not giving an individual the welcome that they deserve, not giving a traveler or a guest a smile to brighten up their day, to welcome them properly, then they'd be saying that in some level we'd be guilty of ritzicha, of murder. That's what they're saying. Yadeinu lo shafchu es adam hazeh. Last night I was at a chasana, I was at a wedding, and it was we'd call a black hat wedding. And there was a few individuals there sitting at the table of the bachrim, of the boys, of the friends of the chassan, of the groom. And they looked in very different ways, shall we say, from the upbringing of the chassan. One had, long hair, and extremely long hair, and one had borderline dreadlocks with tattoos, and different types of guys that you didn't think would fit in at such a wedding. And I was speaking to them, and they basically all said the same thing. What brought them here, what kept them up with this friend of theirs, even though they're, what you would say, from two different backgrounds, two different worlds, is because he always had that smile to them. He always cared about them. They always felt comfortable in his presence. They were never judged in a way that they didn't want to be judged. They felt his care and concern. Because ultimately, sometimes, as many people feel, whether it's just validation for their own issues or justification for things that they shouldn't do, but at least they're saying it, is that sometimes when you don't show that care and concern, you don't show that extra little kindness, you don't give them the welcome, you don't give them a smile, you turn them off, and ultimately that's in some way could be on a ruchniistic level, or sometimes even physically tantamount to ritzicha, to murder. But if we focus on the positive, be it even though those small acts, with just that smile, just that welcome, just that chizuk, just warm words of encouragement, keeping that connection, escorting one properly, departing with them in words of Torah and of chizuk and of warmth and encouragement and atzlacha. Could you imagine what a taiv, what good you'd be doing for people, what doing for the world? So if the negative, these small acts, lead to murder, and the Torah is going to call them murder, that the Zakain, but the elders have to say, we did not kill this individual, which really means that we didn't take these small steps to escort him properly or to give him these levels, small acts of kindness. The positive is the same true, if not a lot greater. Just these small little acts will lead to saving a soul, will lead to performing life-saving, resuscitating actions to this individual's neshama, and to perhaps even him physically. We can be mechaya a person, be mechazik a person, get him to be living, and living in a thriving manner. So as we approach the Yemei Hadin, and as we've started the El process, and the days of introspection and perfecting ourselves, yes, let's take on a Kabbalah. Let's take these small acts, because these small acts, and the way the Torah looks at them, is a direct, large, tremendous, colossal act that's having huge ramifications on the world. As we realize that, and as we take these small acts together, each one individually, but together as a klal, you can imagine what a difference it's going to make up there in Shemayim. The heavens will be stormed as you see Klal Yisrael caring about each other, being concerned for each other, doing chesed for each other, getting out of their comfort zone and helping each other, mechazik each other, be mechaya nefesh. Hopefully HaKadosh Baruch Hu then will look at us and shower down and try to be mechaya our nefesh, to ultimately get to that dveikus, that connection. We'll be living together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'shefa u'b'ar gadol, b'heir me'amenu, speedily in our days. Have a wonderful Shabbos.